I'm going to Copenhagen now, where European Union leaders are meeting for informal talks on the bloc's defence. Heads of state and government from EU member states highlighted the urgency of countering Russia's so-called hybrid attacks. It follows a series of incursions into European airspace and a string of drone sightings at EU airports, suspected of being instigated and controlled by Moscow. Proposals on the table include building a common drone defence and boosting aid to Ukraine for its defence against the Russian invasion. And one option on the table for Ukraine's support is to make use of some 200 billion euros of Russian assets that are currently frozen in European financial institutions. But that plan is controversial.
Ursula von der Leyen has a plan for buying more weapons for Ukraine.
I have put forward the idea of a reparations loan that is based on the immobilized Russian assets. The loan would not be dispersed in one go, but in tranches and with conditions attached.
Calls to use frozen Russian assets are not new, but the action is legally questionable. Von der Leyen thinks she can get around that with her conditions.
Importantly, there is no seizing of the assets.
In other words, Ukraine would give the money back as long as Russia pays it post-war reparations. Western countries have frozen around 300 billion euros of Russian assets. Of that, roughly 200 billion is held by the EU, most of it at Brussels-based financial institution Euroclear. Until now, only the interest generated on Russian assets, around 3 billion euros per year, has been used by the EU to secure loans. Under von der Leyen's plan, Euroclear would lend assets that have matured into cash. Crucially, the plan has been backed by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who was previously reluctant to the idea. With the war against Russia dragging on, Merz wants to send a message to Moscow that Ukraine will be able to last the duration. And that's especially in view of Russia's recent violations of European airspace.
We should take these violations with utmost seriousness, and NATO and EU should act much more forcefully than ever before.
If the plan does come to fruition, it's hoped the money could sustain Ukraine militarily for 3 to 5 years.
Now, let's cross over to DW correspondent Jack Parrick in Copenhagen. Jack, do you think the European leaders will make any progress on using these Russian assets for Ukraine support?
This is the big question. There's sort of a temperature gauge going on as all of the leaders have arrived here in Copenhagen. Are they in favour of it or aren't they? We've seen the Luxembourg Prime Minister, Luc Frieden, say he's probably not in favour of it. The Belgian Prime Minister didn't say anything on the way in, but Belgium is highly exposed to this. It's firstly a political question. Are the EU countries willing to do this? But it's also a legal question. How can they use those assets, and what would it mean if a peace deal was struck with Russia in a future where the Russian invasion on Ukraine ends? So it's extremely politically complicated and legally complicated. What we're seeing is the leaders get together, sort of dancing around it a little bit. But the reality is that a lot of the EU's countries that have been funding Ukraine in its defence against Russia are starting to run out of liquidity to continue to support that funding. And we've heard from a number of senior officials, I've been sat in briefings over the last few days, them saying, listen, this is the next best option, so we better start talking about it.
Now, what's the security situation like there in Copenhagen after these drone incidents in Denmark and in other European places?
Yeah, so this is the big sort of glamorous summit of the 6-month presidency that Denmark holds of the European Council. But just a week ago, we saw drone incursions into Denmark over the Copenhagen airport that shut the airport down. I was actually stuck there myself, to be honest with you, Gerhard. But we've seen a lot of drone incursions on EU member states' airspace, including Romania, Estonia and Poland. And there's a big concern about what they should do. The European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, has put forward this idea of a drone wall, a sort of coordinated structured system that EU countries can club together financially, militarily, to try and bring down any drones that come into the airspace. But it's technically complicated, geopolitically complicated, militarily complicated for the EU to do such things. We know that the Germans have expressed some resistance heading into this summit, also how it would be financed, but we know that the leaders will knock heads on that during this summit here in Copenhagen.
Jack, I think we have a soundbite from Denmark on this topic.
I hope that everybody recognizes now that there is a hybrid war, and one day it's Poland, the other day it's Denmark, and next week it will probably be somewhere else that we see sabotage, or we see drones flying, or we see you can there are many different kind of episodes. So I see this from a European perspective. There is only one country that are willing to threat us, and it is Russia, and therefore we need a very strong answer back.
Now, Jack, what else is on the agenda there?
Well, one of the things that's not on the agenda, Gerhard, which is pretty important and significant, and a lot of countries are going to be raising this, is Gaza and the ongoing situation there. It was decided by the Council that they wouldn't put this on the agenda, bearing in mind this Trump plan about what would happen for a peace plan with Gaza. A lot of countries are in favour of it. We've seen a lot of EU leaders express some favour towards that, and we expect that there will be some big discussions on that as well.
DW's correspondent Jack Parrock there, reporting from Copenhagen. Thank you very much, Jack.